Okay.
Now I'm going to speak about some immediate reactions from the press. Shortly after the publication of Humane Vitae, means of human life, first words of the encyclical, journalists would come and speak to me, and one journalist from an American paper, I can't remember now which paper it was, but it was some prominent American newspaper, something like the Washington Post or New York Times or something like that, I'm not quite sure now. But he came into me and he said to me, I noticed that you published an article by Bishop Quinn, who was then an auxiliary bishop, by Bishop Quinn in defense of Humane Vitae, in which he attacked an article written by some Jesuit theologian. So I said, yes, I published that. And he said, did you publish the original article by the Jesuit theologian, Richard something else, did you, to which the bishop was replying? Oh, I said, no. He said, why not? Oh, I said, because the devil has got sufficient newspapers to publish his views, your own, for instance. So naturally he got mad. And he said, you're just like the Russian newspaper, Pravda. I said, yes, Pravda, I said, means truth. And the motto of my order, I'm a Dominican, the motto of my order is Veritas, truth. So I said, it is my greatest boast that we are the Pravda of the Catholic Church. But he got mad. And then I said, I'm busy now. I said, get out. Well, you can imagine what happened. He went off and he wrote a full-page article in his newspaper about me. The heading was, over a whole page, "We are the Pravda of the Catholic Church," said Lambert Greenan, O.P., editor of the English language edition of the Osservatore Romano. Now, then followed a whole page of denunciation. Sister Catherine, when she saw this, she was furious. If somebody in America sent it to me, and I immediately thought of what the nuncio had said when interviewing me. The first mistake you make will be your last because you'll be fired. And I thought to myself, oh, this is the first mistake for which I will be fired. And then I looked at the date. The date was about 2 weeks earlier. I knew that Archbishop Benelli would have received it by the diplomatic bag about 10 days earlier, and the sky had not fallen. He used to say about me, the Irish are difficult, but they're orthodox. So I didn't worry. But then others came to me, and they were against me. They'd come in and fight about various things which I had written, and I would defend them. Then an interesting thing arose. About, I would say about 4 months after the publication of Humane Vitae. And you must remember that week after week I was publishing various articles by, say, Cardinal Wright and other people, but I was publishing a series of articles every week in defense of Humanae Vitae. So eventually I was summoned to headquarters, Secretary of State, and my immediate superior, who afterwards was the papal nuncio here in Washington, Katja Villan. He was now Cardinal Katja Villan. And Katja and I were good friends. And when I went in, he said to me very simply, "Lambert, don't you think that perhaps you're publishing too much about Humanae Vitae?" So I said very simply, like a simpleton, "The thought never crossed my mind." So he said, rather sharply, "The superiors say," they always say superiors, when they mean the superior. That one superior was Archbishop Benelli. "The superiors say that the thought is there for you to consider." And I said in the same simple manner, "Oh," I said, "is that the way it is?" And he said, "Yes," he said. So I thought for a moment, and I said, "Well," I said, "you can tell the superiors that they're going to get Humanae Vitae until it comes out their ears, and I bid you goodbye." And I walked out. No doubt he went along to Archbishop Benelli and would have told him what I had just said, and no doubt Archbishop Benelli, as usual, would have said, "The Irish, they are difficult, but they're orthodox." So that was the end of that. There was never any further reference to the matter. I had a free hand, and I kept on for some years defending Humanae Vitae. Now, some interesting reactions. Here was I slogging away from Monday to Saturday, proofreading and correcting and doing all these things. And it was hard work, working down on the bench, hot lead and all that. But I did not think of another aspect, which was that the good that I was doing, and which I could not see, be aware of. But one man wrote to me one day, and he said, he was a layman, he said, "Father, the priest in our parish, last Sunday he preached in favour of abortion. So what can we do?" He said, "I go my own lonely way to God with the help of the English edition of L'Osservatore Romano." Then another interesting thing, Father Miller, who was here last week, he's now teaching up at Emmitsburg Seminary. Father Miller was giving a weekend retreat here, and on the Sunday, the final Sunday, at the final Mass, I was concelebrating, and while he was preaching a homily, I was sitting there in the sanctuary. I must confess, I wasn't following with very much interest what he was saying. And then, suddenly and dramatically, he paused and turned round and he pointed at me. "Do you see that priest there?" He said. So, of course, naturally, I sat up. And he said, if it were not for him, he said, I would not be a priest today. Well, I was amazed to see. When I was in the seminary, he said, we had professors teaching us. You couldn't trust them. They were teaching us all kinds of rubbish, all kinds of false doctrine. and we knew it to be false, so we paid no attention to what was taught to us in class. But my mother gave me a subscription to the English edition of the Observatory Minute, of which he was the editor. And there was another student in our class, and he also had a subscription. So we got 2 copies every week, and we read them and we circulated it among all the members of our class. And we paid no attention whatsoever to what the professors were teaching us. So I can say, if it were not for him, he said, I would not be a priest here today. Well, of course, that was a tremendous tribute, and I began to think that was really sufficient thanks for all the hard work which I had done and which I thought nobody was appreciating. And then on another occasion, we had a priest here called Father Mastroeni. Mastroeni, I think his name was. He gave a retreat here, and he wrote to me after the retreat, and he said to me that if it were not for me, he would not be a priest, that I was the one responsible for saving his vocation. So those are 2 wonderful tributes, and more than ample thanks for the work which I had been doing and which I thought was not being appreciated. Well, now, where do we go from there with regard to Humana Vitae? Well, we can advance 3 years. It comes to the next Synod of Bishops. But I said about Bishop Powers and later Archbishop Fitzgerald, they had visited me on the occasion of their being present at the Synod of Bishops. They had been elected to represent, respectively, Canada and South Africa. Now, the next Synod came, and it so happened that in these countries sent the president of their conference to represent them. Powers was still the president in Canada, and Archbishop Fitzgerald, he was president in South Africa. So beforehand, before the Synod, we of course received a long documentation about the Synod, and eventually the names of all those who would be attending. Sister Catherine from Mankato, Minnesota, she was reading through all this documentation, and she said to me, "Your 2 enemies are coming." Oh, I said, Sister, I have no enemies. I said, Christ said, love your enemies. So my principle is, love your enemies. I said, it'll drive them mad. So, sure enough, Bishop Powers came along representing Canada, and Bishop Fitzgerald came. Now, our prior in Santa Mente was Father Luke Dempsey. He was a student of mine many years earlier, my student. And then afterwards he went to Canada, and he was teaching in the diocese of Bishop Powers in Antigonish. And Bishop Powers and himself became great friends. Now he came back, and he was in Santa Mente, and of course he had heard of the row between Bishop Powers and myself. When Bishop Powers returned for the next synod, he was now prior, he invited Bishop Powers to a dinner on a Sunday in Santa Mente. And he came to me and he said, "I don't want my guests savaged." Well, of course, I don't savage guests. I said, I don't savage guests. I said, well, I'll tell you something. If he steps out of line with regard to Humana Vitae, he will have had it. And I said, the same goes for you, my prior. So Bishop Powers arrived, and we were having the the drinks before dinner in the salone, and Bishop Powers, accompanied by the prior, Father Dempsey, came in, and Father Dempsey presented all the members of the community, one by one, to the bishop. I was the senior, the oldest in the community, so when he came to me, he did not present me. He just looked at Bishop Powers and he said, "I think you and he know each other." And Bishop Powers came up to me. "Oh yes," he said, "I know Father Lambert." And he put his arm around me, and he turned me around to face the community. And he said to the community, "This is a great man. He defended humane vitae." Well, I could have collapsed after what had happened. But obviously, in the meantime, he had seen the light, and he had come to realize what they had done wrong with the Winnipeg statement. So he defended me, and we had a wonderful dinner together and wonderful time afterwards, coffee and liqueurs and that. So we became friends. Then the other bishop, Bishop Fitzgerald, I was sitting in my office one morning at 9 o'clock, the phone rang, I picked it up. He said, "This is Archbishop Fitzgerald speaking." "Oh," I said, "Excellency, delighted to hear your voice. When can I see you?" he said. Well, I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm at Fiumicino Airport." And, well, I said, "If you take a taxi, you could be here in half an hour, at 9:30. Everybody said, "I'll be there at 9:30. So I turned to Sister Catherine and I said, "We're in trouble." I said, "He's coming in, he's on the warpath." So I said, "He won't have had anything to eat on the plane. So make him some coffee, some breakfast coffee and cookies and that, for him, so ready just when he arrives at 9:30. So Catherine got going, made the coffee and the cookies, and 9:30, more or less on the dot, he stepped into the office. She shook hands with him, but he stepped past her into my office, and she came in after him, and I held out my hand to greet him, but he ignored it. He just walked straight at me, and I thought he was going to hit me, but I was prepared for any eventuality. Yes? Yes? From whom? And what do I do? Do I hang up? Very good. Thank you. Hello? Yes? Oh, Suzanne, how are you? Thank you ever so much. Thank you ever so much. I'm getting very